Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the Dodgers actually made a couple moves on Thursday. None of them are very impactful, but they're all kind of interesting. So we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about some possible trade scenarios for Sonny Gray and Bryan Reynolds and maybe some other guys. And we're going to talk about Carlos Rodón signing with the Yankees. That's what's on tap. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Dodger fans. This is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you will never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snider. My co-host is Vince Samperio, although we are doing a split episode today, so it'll be me for the first half, Vince for the second half. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning, and that's what we're going to do today. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And I mentioned at the top, the Dodgers made a couple moves, and I also found in the transaction logs another move that nobody has mentioned, and there's kind of a good reason for that. So I'm going to talk about a few of those moves, and then in the second segment, I'm going to talk a little bit about some trade scenarios that some listeners have messaged me about. Appreciate that. And as I said at the top of the show, none of these moves are likely to be very impactful. One of them has potential, maybe, but they're all kind of interesting in their own special ways. Let's talk first about the one that has the best chance, I think, to make an impact on the team, and that is the Dodgers reacquired Adam Kolarek. Kolarek. I think I used to say Kolarek, then maybe it's Kolarek. Oh, I don't know. Adam K. Not my cousin, Adam Cass. Adam Kolarek. Man, now I'm in my head. Kolarek. All right, let's call the whole thing off. No, Dodgers reacquired him from the A's, and I was surprised to look and see that he was terrible with the A's. The Dodgers, you'll remember, they traded him after 2020 in the trade that brought Sheldon Neuse over and also brought over Gus Varland, who recently was taken from the Dodgers in the Rule 5 draft. Sheldon Neuse is now playing in he just signed to play somewhere in Asia. I don't remember if it's the KBO or MPB, but somewhere. Anyway, so basically nobody involved in that trade is with the team they were traded to because Kolarek is back with the Kolarek feels right. He's back with the Dodgers. And in his 2 years with the A's, he was terrible in the big leagues with an ERA in the 5s and 6s. And he was terrible in AAA too. He spent most of his time in AAA and he was bad there. You remember Adam Kolarek with the Dodgers in 2019 and 2020. He came over from the Rays in a trade in 2019. And with the Dodgers, he was outstanding. And he had between the two seasons with the Dodgers, he had a combined 0.88 ERA. That was 0.77 in 11.2 innings in 2019 after the trade. And then in the shortened 2020 season, he pitched 19 innings and had an ERA of 0.95. Just outstanding. He struggled in the postseason that year. He got rocked a little bit in both the NLDS and the NLCS. Pitched 2/3 of an inning in the World Series, didn't allow any runs then, but he was a vital part of that World Series winning team. He was their top left-handed reliever probably, especially after Caleb Ferguson got hurt. Adam Kolarek was kind of the guy in 2020. And then the Dodgers traded him, and he had in 2021 an ERA of 8 with the A's, and in 2022, 4.58. So 5.74 combined in the big leagues. And as I mentioned, he was in the 5s and 6s in AAA. And if you look at before he came to the Dodgers with Tampa Bay, 2017, 6.48 ERA, 2018, 3.93, 2019, 3.27. So he was starting to find it. But overall with the Rays in parts of 3 years, 4.19 ERA. So it's kind of crazy. 4.19 with the Rays, 0.88 with the Dodgers, 5.74 with the A's. Is there Dodgers magic? I don't know. But if there is, the Dodgers might get it back. They didn't acquire him in a trade. They signed him to a minor league contract, which is even better because that means he doesn't take up a 40-man roster spot. They can, if he makes the team out of spring training, then they'll find room on the roster. And once spring training starts, they'll have more room on the roster because they can move Walker Buehler and Blake Treinen into the 60-day injured list, open up 2 40-man roster spots that way. They'll have more room once spring training starts, but now Kolarek they don't have to worry about him the rest of this offseason taking up a roster spot. And if they can help him refine that magic, he was so good, and he's almost 34 years old. He'll be 34 in January. Maybe he's just done, but he was such a big part of the Dodgers. And even when he's been struggling, he's still been good against lefties. And so I don't know if it was a usage thing, although even with the Dodgers, he was even better against lefties and better against righties than he was with anybody else. So it's not just usage, but if the Dodgers can help him rediscover that, that would be pretty awesome. So happy to have Adam Kolarek back in the Dodgers organization. The next move I want to talk about, I just saw in the transaction logs, the Dodgers signed, and it says outfielder James Jones. And that's all the log says. Dodgers signed outfielder James Jones to a minor league contract. It's a weird signing when you have a hard time even figuring out who the player is that they're talking about, because nobody jumped out at me when I did a search for James Jones. Like, there's no current big leaguers named James Jones, and then I looked in the minor league section of Baseball Reference, and nobody really there jumped out. Turns out who it is. It's a guy who was listed in the big leaguer section, but said 2014 and 2015 because that's when this guy played in the big leagues. He got 359 plate appearances with the Mariners in 2014 and 2015, had a combined 238 average, 564 OPS. That's a 63 OPS plus. And then he became a pitcher. He was a hitter through about 2015, an outfielder. And then in 2016, he started pitching and in the minor leagues, and he was not good. His career ERA in the minors was not terrible, 4.48, but there's a lot of, he started to figure out a little bit in 2019. His combined ERA was 2.67 in 64 innings between AA and AAA. But then again, once it got to 2020, there was no minor league season. 2021, he was back up to 5.14 ERA, and then he was pitching. He was out of baseball. 2022, he was in the Rangers organization and had a 4.32 ERA between AA and AAA, and a little bit in rookie ball. And now, but the log said they signed outfielder James Jones. So I don't know if that's an error or if James Jones has given up on the pitching and he's going back to hitting. This one, it's almost sure to turn to nothing because this is a minor league contract for a guy who is 34 years old. He is almost as old as Clayton Kershaw. He's about 6 months younger. Yeah, 6 months and 5 days younger than Clayton Kershaw. So chances are he's not going to have his breakthrough. But it's always just interesting to talk about one like that. And then the other transaction was the Dodgers did make a trade with the A's. They got a guy named Yanni Hernandez. Could be Johnny Hernandez. My whole world view has been thrown off by the fact that I found out that Yimi Garcia actually prefers to go by Jimmy Garcia, which makes sense if some Spanish-speaking countries, they do pronounce the Y sound like a J, como te llamas, a little bit. And so I noticed Blue Jays announcers saying Jimmy Garcia for Yimi Garcia, and found out that apparently he prefers that. So maybe Yanni Hernandez is Johnny Hernandez. Either way, he's 5'8", 140 pounds. And that would make him the lightest player in Dodgers history in the live ball era, not counting two guys, one named Barney Koch and one named Pat Enkenman, who both played for the Dodgers during World War II. As you recall, during World War II, almost every big leaguer spent time in the military, at least some. And so a lot of guys who weren't major league quality ended up playing in the major leagues. And so you have Pat Enkenman, who had played briefly for the St. Louis the St. Louis Cardinals in 1936. He got in one game. He went 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts and a sacrifice bunt. That was the extent of his major league career. And then during World War II, when the Dodgers needed players, Pat Enkenman made the team, got 31 plate appearances, and posted a 517 OPS. And then there was Barney Koch, who his only major league time was in 1944, 101 plate appearances, a 482 OPS. Barney Koch was 5'8", 140 pounds. Pat Enkelman was 5'4", 125 pounds. Since the live ball era, and not counting World War II, the lightest Dodger in history was Wilton Guerrero, who was 145 pounds. Johnny Hernandez would be the lightest. He 5 pounds lighter than Wilton Guerrero. That's probably the most interesting thing about him. We probably won't say his name much because he's unlikely to be a very impactful player. He's probably going to be in AAA and maybe get an occasional call up, or he could be DFA'd to make room for somebody else later this offseason, and then we'll never hear about him. Probably not, because he has 2 options left and 6 years of team control left. But anyway, those are the 3 transactions that, like I said, they're all interesting for different reasons. And so I thought I'd mention them. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about a couple messages from listeners that I've gotten about possible trade proposals. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Look, I've talked to you about Built Bar before. If you're a regular listener, you've heard me talk about Built Bar. You know I love Built Bar, and you got to hear about Built's new reimagined flavors: cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, and coconut brownie topper. White chocolate peppermint granola. It's Built's take on the granola bar, so it's more filling and still insanely tasty. Candy cane brownie, puff. Built puffs are like budding in the universe's most delicious cloud. Look, Built bars are delicious. Built puffs, they're like chocolate covered marshmallows. And did I mention all this stuff is good for you? It's all high protein, low sugar, low carb, low calorie, all the good stuff, none of the bad stuff, all covered in 100% real chocolate, and yet still good for you. Like, I'm not kidding. We have Built bars and Built puffs all over our pantry. Everybody in my family loves them, especially me, especially those cookie dough chunk ones, man. If you can get your hands on the cookie dough chunk, you should do it. Whatever you're going to get, go to built.com right now and use promo code LOCKEDON15 to get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, I am back. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the YouTube comments. If you're on the listening on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you in other ways, whether through social media or email or text or whatever. A couple people have reached out to me on social media and similar questions, even though they're asking about different people. And our buddy Brandon Johnson at BrandonJohn442 on Twitter, he said there's a report saying the Twins are listening to offers on Sonny Gray and Kenta Maeda. What do you think Sonny Gray would cost player-wise, showing that Sonny Gray is due to make $12.7 million in 2023? And then the other question was from Kerry Komosko at GDodger11 on Twitter. He said, considering team control on Bryan Reynolds and Willy Adames, what prospects would you part with to acquire them straight up? The reason I'm reading both of these together, even though they are different questions, is because I struggle with knowing what sort of prospect package to put together. I lived through the Pedro Martinez trade, the Paul Konerko trade, obviously more recently the Yordan Alvarez trade. The O'Neill Cruz trade has potential to make us sad like that too. But there's also been a lot of trades that didn't turn out like that. You know, when Jose De Leon got traded for Logan Forsythe, people were like, oh, Jose De Leon, he's going to be awesome. Why would we give him up for Logan Forsythe? Jose De Leon just signed with the Twins. He's just bounced around. He's never turned into that great pitcher. There's always, the Dodgers win a lot of trades. They do lose some once in a while. But so when we're talking about trading prospects for established players, I'm not a prospect expert, and so I have a hard time there. There are a couple guys who I feel like personally, I want them to be untouchable. Diego Cartaya should not go anywhere. Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone should not go anywhere. That's close to it. Obviously Miguel Vargas, I don't want him going anywhere. I want him getting his chances with the Dodgers. Everybody else, I'd be open to a trade, I think. Even there's pitchers who have potential to be really, really good. There's position players who have potential to be really, really good. Michael Busch, I think he's going to be a great hitter. I'm not sure that that's going to be with the Dodgers. I don't know if there's a fit there. And so Michael Busch, maybe his best value is as trade bait. I don't know. Guys like that, Ryan Pepio. I love Ryan Pepio. Like I think he's going to be a very good pitcher. I think changeup pitchers take a little bit longer to get acclimated in the big leagues to figure out, because changeup is a chase pitch. I've talked about this before. My theory that I don't know if it holds any weight. I've never run it by anybody smart. But my theory is that because changeup is a chase pitch, you kind of rely on fooling guys and getting them to chase a pitch out of the zone, that it takes longer to get going in the big leagues because big league hitters don't chase as much. So you have to kind of figure out where to throw the ball to get the chase. You're not going to get as drastic chases. So I think that's why Tony Gonsolin took a little while. I think it's why Pepio's taking a little while. But I think an effective changeup can be a devastating pitch. Pedro Martinez was a changeup pitcher. Trevor Hoffman, these guys who their best pitch is a changeup, have had a ton of success. And so I think Pepio is going to be very good. And he's been on this podcast. He's a great, great guy. But he may be trade bait. I don't know. And so for me, other than those four guys I mentioned, Cartaya and Vargas and Miller and Stone, there's not many untouchables for me. And so really, I know this is an unsatisfying answer because I do a Dodgers podcast and these trade talks are fun to talk about. But I have a hard time, like my default setting is, well, Andrew Friedman knows his guys better than I do. Whatever he does, I am going to assume he did it right. And I know that attitude drives a lot of people crazy, especially the people who think Andrew Friedman is bad at his job. And I don't subscribe to that theory. I believe that Andrew Friedman has proven by putting together great teams over and over and over and over and over again that he's very good at his job. And I think the relative lack of World Series success, only one World Series title, I think that has a lot of people frustrated and thinking Friedman is worse at his job than he is. But I believe that there's a lot more luck involved in the postseason than in the regular season, and that's the difference. And so, yeah, I mean, I'd love to have Sonny Gray on the team. I think Sonny Gray is a very good pitcher and would fit in well in the Dodgers rotation. Bryan Reynolds, I think it would be great. And, I assume James Outman would be part of a package going for Bryan Reynolds. And I think that would make some people unhappy. I'm not as high on Outman as some people are. I think he's going to be solid. Don't think he's going to be amazing. I think he's going to strike out a lot and frustrate people a lot. Bryan Reynolds is going to strike out a lot too. But I think James Outman would be the part of a package for Bryan Reynolds. And, if rumors are true that the Pirates are looking for a Juan Soto type package for Bryan Reynolds, I don't think the Dodgers are going to do that because the Dodgers didn't do a Juan Soto type package for Juan Soto, and Juan Soto is a better player than Bryan Reynolds. So if the price comes down, it would still probably include Outman, and I would trust that Friedman's going to do it right. So I apologize that those answers suck, but I only have time to be an expert on so many things, and I focus a lot on the big league team, and there are some minor. I pay attention to the minor leagues. I talk to people. But I don't know enough. And it's a reason why I talk about the Dodgers instead of being the Dodgers general manager. So that's my thoughts on that. I hope that's okay. That's going to do it for me. Vince is going to come along and talk about, I think he's going to talk about Carlos Rodón signing with the Yankees and maybe another thing or two. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. I really appreciate it. I will talk to you on Monday, and Vince will be along in a minute.
Hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. But nah, you live nearby. You can make it home. It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job. You total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risk of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay after a few drinks, think again, play it safe, and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Yo, Dodger fans, Vince here to close out the episode. And as Jeff mentioned, going to talk about Carlos Rodón signing with the Yankees. And it doesn't mean too much for the Dodgers, but just kind of talking through that and why the Dodgers weren't in on it. And then real quick before that, just a little bit of interesting news. So Jeter Downs, who was one of the players traded to the Red Sox in the Mookie Betts trade, wasn't the biggest part of that deal. The biggest part of that deal was Alex Verdugo, but Jeter Downs was one of the players that the Dodgers got in that big trade with the Reds. That also brought him Josiah Gray. That ended up sending Puig and a few others over to Cincinnati. So he was part of that trade, ended up being part of the Mookie Betts trade, and was designated for assignment by the Red Sox. So, yeah, we've talked about the Dodgers winning trades and losing trades, and they seem to win a lot of the trades where they get premium talent. They haven't really lost out. I mean, even in the trade for Manny Machado, Dean Kramer ended up being pretty decent and still is pitching, but the main guy, Yusniel Diaz, he never really worked out. Mookie Betts, I mean, Verdugo's been fine, but Jeter Downs now designated for assignment. Connor Wong's been up and down for them. And, Willie Calhoun never quite worked out for the Rangers in the Yu Darvish trade. So some of those trades, and then obviously we know the Jordan trade and the O'Neal Cruz trade, those have not really worked out. But either way, it's just an interesting note that, and one of those things where it's like, do teams want to avoid trading with the Dodgers because of this? It's very possible. The Dodgers have never really given up a heralded prospect that ended up working out and hurting them. Jeff mentioned, De Leon earlier in this episode. He never really worked out, and there's been a bunch of other guys that never really worked out. So it's just, will this ever affect the Dodgers? I don't think so. Teams are still going to want to trade and still going to want to get talent if they can. But if I was a GM for another team, I might be a little weary of trading with the Dodgers. But moving on, Carlos Rodón signed a 6-year, $162 million deal with the Yankees. And yeah, the Dodgers weren't going to do that. I don't think, I mentioned on whenever we talked about Rodón, whether it was yesterday, 2 days ago, whatever it was, that I don't think the Dodgers would have minded the years if the money was right. Like a 7-year, $150 million deal, where you're around, 20, 21 million or so. I think they would have been more in on that. But going up to 27 million AAV like the Yankees did, I don't think they were ever really going to be in on that, especially for a guy like Rodón, who has never quite been fully healthy. And if he has been healthy, he hasn't been as good as he was. So we've never really seen, I mean, he was relatively healthy last year, but, small sample size. I don't know if that's something you're willing to put money on. At this point, the Dodgers could find a troubled starter. And as long as that trend continues, as long as the Tyler Anderson, Andrew Heaney trend continues, they can keep finding these guys on short or one-year deals and resurrect them and hope that supplements, who they have at the top, Buehler, Julio, things like that. But what is interesting about Rodón, the Dodgers were mentioned, linked to him. Obviously, they were not going to be one of the ones that offered him a big long-term deal like he got. But what it does a little bit is kind of set a market or an idea for Julio Urías, who will be a free agent at the end of this season. And, 6 and 162, Rodón's over the age of 30 already. So that sets a borderline or that sets a mark for Julio. If he definitely is going to want more than 6 and 162. And it's one of those where, are the Dodgers going to be willing to do that? And we've talked about it before. And it just depends. I mean, obviously this season is also going to depend how he does, but I don't know if the Dodgers see Julio as a number one per se, like a true number one. I think obviously he was the number one last year. He'll be the number one this year. And he can prove everyone wrong and have a crazy year this year and, average 6-7 innings a start and, get closer to 200 innings and, make 30 starts or so. That's also going to be contingent on the Dodgers letting him do that. But it's one of those where, is Julio going to price himself out? And this is one of those where, yes, the Dodgers have the money. And even, this year, they're, maybe resetting the tax if possible. Next year, they won't have to do, like, if they don't cross the tax this year, they'll not have to worry about it next year. Ohtani will be on the free agent market. That's another one that they name. But, Julio's the other guy that is going to be out there and could be a guy that commands, 180, 200 mil potentially. He's going to be younger than Rodón was and has been more successful in a longer stint. I think Rodón might be a little bit more dominant in the sense of his stuff and being able to overpower people. But, Julio's been able to be a really, really, really good pitcher, even though he's lost a little bit of velocity. But he's been able to maintain him pitching well, just, based on the fact of the command that he has and the pitches that he has. And he's able to beat you with 3 different pitches. And if he doesn't have one of those pitches, he's still able to beat you with 2 different pitches. And, that's the case there. And I think this is a true contract year for Julio because of that. Because, like I said, can he be a true number one on a World Series contender? That still remains to be seen, I think, to me and maybe to others, just based on the fact that he hasn't, he's not a guy that's been allowed to go out there and, throw 6-7 innings for 30 starts a year. He hasn't been allowed to do that. And that's not a, it's hard to put that knock on him when he hasn't really been that guy. But it's also a matter of, is his ERA this low the last couple of years because the Dodgers are handling them this way? It's kind of like a Jock Peterson effect or Andre Ethier effect back in the day where, yeah, his numbers look good because he's been getting placed in favorable situations. And, I don't think Julio's that way. I think Julio can be a guy that can throw you near 200 innings, 30 starts a year, 30 plus starts a year, going 6-7 every time out, getting to face the lineup a third time, and figure things out, because I do think he has a good solid 3-pitch mix that he can figure it out. And, he has the accuracy and he has the control and he has the command and he's able to do that. So I think it puts that number in your mind. 6-162 would be the floor for a Julio deal after this season. And you're looking more at, 7-8 years now with him, maybe, possibly $200 million. Is that something the Dodgers want to do? I don't know. It's going to be dependent because, they will be getting Walker Buehler back the year after. If Gonsolin and May progress, then they're, taking a step up. Realistically, Kershaw could keep coming back to the Dodgers, hopefully, until he's going to retire. So, the rotation could be Seb, Bobby Miller, Gavin Stone, Pepio, Andre Jackson, Michael Grove. One or two of those guys could step up and step in and be ready to go. And, it's a matter of, is there going to be room for Julio? And hopefully I think there will be and there should be. But I do think this is one of the more true contract years because, a bad season or another season of, less than 175 total innings and you're pushing getting paid number one starter money. You're getting into the realm of, low tier number one, high tier number two money, which could be long term, especially the way teams are handing out deals now, but it might not necessarily be as fruitful. It could be an 8-year, $160 million deal. Or 8 years 175 instead of 8 years 200, whatever it is. So yeah, salute to the Yankees. Shout out to them for stepping up and doing what they told Aaron Judge they were going to do and make their team better. I don't think the Dodgers were ever going to be in on that price, and maybe that's why they signed Syndergaard the other day. Maybe they knew Rodon's already out of our price range. I don't think we're going to get him. Let's continue on with our off season and move forward and we'll hopefully not reinvent, but hopefully get Syndergaard to another level and that's what they can hope for. So that's it. That's all. The top free agent list continues to dwindle. Dansby Swanson was mentioned again today, not for the Dodgers specifically, but more for the Red Sox, maybe looking at him. Dodgers listed as one of the teams interested in him. I don't truly believe that interest is that deep other than, okay, if nobody else wants him and we can get him to a smaller deal, then, maybe we'll pounce. So We are done for the week now. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Check out Locked On Sports today for your second listen. The biggest stories of the day, instant reaction, the big game recaps, and take of the day. Available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, which is also how you can find us. Wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, search for Locked On Dodgers, which is also how you can find us on social media, Locked On Dodgers on Twitter and Instagram. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts if you need to get a hold of us. You can also get a hold of us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Tell your smart device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.